Welcome to meeting number 89 of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. The committee is meeting today to study the question of privilege related to the member for Wellington Halton Hills and other members. Before we begin, all comments through the chair. The clerk and I will maintain a consolidated speaking list. We have with us today from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Rob Stewart, Deputy Minister, International Trade. DM Stewart, you will have up to 5 minutes for your opening comments, and we pass the floor over to you. Welcome to PROC.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. Since late last year, this committee has been looking at foreign interference in Canada's elections, and I commend your commitment to this important issue. Ensuring that Canada's elections remain free and fair and Canadian is a critical part of keeping our democratic processes legitimate, credible, and trustworthy. I am here today to speak to my time as a member of the panel entrusted with administering the critical election incident public protocol, which is a role I occupied while I was Deputy Minister of Public Safety during the 2021 general election. Madam Chair, before I begin, I wish to reiterate what has already been said in this committee by myself and other witnesses in both 2019 and 21. The panel concluded that foreign interference did not impact the integrity of the general election. However, we know that threats to democracies such as ours are real. To ensure Canada is in the best position to combat such threats, the government introduced its whole-of-society plan to protect Canada's democracy ahead of the 2019 general election. The critical election incident public protocol is a key initiative in this plan. The protocol establishes a process by which Canadians are informed in the event of an incident or series of incidents that impact Canada's ability to have a free and fair election during the period the Caretaker Convention is in effect. The protocol is administered by a panel of 5 senior public servants. The panel is entrusted with exercising significant judgment and draws on information and intelligence sources from within and outside the public service in determining whether an incident or series of incidents meets the threshold for public announcement. This determination would be made on a consensual basis. The threshold for public announcement by the panel is high and is considered to be a last resort. It is a last resort since the protocol and the threshold outlined in it must be understood within the wider context of Canada's federal election security infrastructure. During election periods, Canadian laws apply, and Canada's national security and law enforcement agencies continue to carry out their mandates. Elections Canada independently administers the Canada Elections Act, and the Commissioner of Canada Elections investigates and enforces breaches of the Act. Political parties, candidates, and media engage in democratic debate and are in a position to engage in fact-checking or bring to attention false narratives circulating in the media or online. The protocol does not replace Canada's laws or national security agencies. The information that the panel relies on to inform its discussions and deliberations can come from a variety of sources. In 2021, the panel received briefs from the Security and Intelligence Threats to Election Task Force, SITE, which consists of the Communications Security Establishment, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and the Rapid Response Mechanism at Global Affairs Canada. It is important to understand that although the SITE task force comes together to brief the panel, the agencies may also directly inform an affected party of an incident. As this committee is aware, there is always a baseline threat of foreign interference occurring in Canada. Our national security agencies continually work to combat and address the threat to keep Canadians safe, both outside and during the election period. The protocol is one of a larger system in place to protect Canada's elections, and it must be understood within this context. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to talk about the protocol and the role of the panel in the 2021 general election. I welcome your questions. En anglais ou français?
Thank you very much, Deputy, and I appreciate you having worked with the clerk and our team to find a time that worked for your schedule and making yourself available, so we appreciate that. We will start with 6-minute rounds, starting with Mr. Cooper, followed by Mr. Gerritsen, suivi par Madame Goudreau, et puis
followed by Madame Goudreau and then Madame Blaney.
Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Stewart, for coming back to committee. Mr. Stewart, you were the recipient of a May 2021 issues management note from CSIS indicating that Member of Parliament Michael Chong and his family were being targeted by the Beijing regime. That issues management note had been sent to you in your capacity as Deputy Minister of Public Safety, as well as the then Minister of Public Safety, now Minister of National Defense, Bill Blair, as well as his Chief of Staff. Further, you were the recipient of a July 20th, 2021 CSIS intelligence assessment, further indicating that MP Chong, as well as at least 2 other MPs, were being targeted by the Beijing regime. Despite this, MP Chong was kept in the dark for 2 years, resulting in what is now before this committee upon the Speaker of the House's finding of a prima facie question of privilege. So let me begin with the issues management note. On what date did you read that note?
I am unable to answer that question with specificity. I would tell you that in the river of intelligence that crossed my desk, it could have occurred at any point in time subsequent to when it was written.
The issues management note was not any piece of intelligence information. According to the CSIS director, an IMU is something that is flagged as something of high importance. And so, did you read that note, yes or no, as a starting point?
Again, I do not recollect reading it, but I think I would have because I saw a lot of intelligence.
You would have seen that, and would that have been in May of 2021?
In all likelihood.
Do you have any recollection of briefing Minister Blair about the IMU?
I did not brief Mr. Blair about the IMU.
You did not brief him, and why did you not take it upon yourself to brief Minister Blair?
The intelligence moves in the system through various channels, and one of the channels that it moves through inside the Department of Public Safety is to the minister separately from the deputy minister. And in the context of our discussions with CSIS was when issues management notes are generally raised, not by me.
And the issues management note was sent to Minister Blair directly. And Minister Blair, when he appeared before this committee, made the incredible assertion that the director of CSIS had made, quote, an operational decision, close quote, not to share the IMU with him, despite the fact that it was sent to the minister via the top secret email network, and Minister Blair didn't see it because he didn't have the login credentials to the top secret email network. But nonetheless, he made the assertion that the director of CSIS had made an operational decision not to inform him. When Mr. Vino, the director of CSIS, appeared before this committee, he flatly said that that wasn't so, that he had every intention of the minister seeing that IMU. In fact, Vino said that I conveyed the information to the Department of Public Safety along with a very specific directive to forward it to the minister. Do you recall or are you aware of any operational decision not to inform Minister Blair?
No.
Okay, thank you for that. Were you aware that Minister Blair did not have access to the top secret email network? Can you explain why after 18 months into the job, Minister Blair would and his chief of staff would not have had their login credentials?
It would not be the fact that in the normal course a minister or their staff would have access to these systems. The access is tightly controlled and generally run by bureaucrats, and the way that the intelligence moved through the department was in paper form. So I would receive briefing binders on a regular basis with the contents of intelligence produced by various systems, because we have more than one.
But the IMU was in this instance sent by email, and it was sent to Minister Blair. So can you explain how it is that he didn't see it?
I would not believe that it was sent by email, to be clear. It would have been sent on one of our top secret systems, and it would have been downloaded and printed and then packaged for Minister Blair. And that would have been the normal course.
Okay, I'm going to ask you now about the July 2021 memo from CSIS. On what date did you read that memo?
I'm sorry. Again, I cannot answer with specificity. The volume of intelligence, and I really have to emphasize this point, is very large.
But there is a large volume of intelligence, but this was a matter that is about as serious as it gets, involving the targeting of a sitting member of Parliament, and it was not any memo that was sent. It was an IMU initially in May of 2021, and in July of 2021 followed up with another intelligence memo. Would you at least concede the fact that you cannot recall seeing the latter memo? You thought you read the first one, but you said you didn't talk to the minister about it, and Michael Chong was left in the dark that amounted to a complete breakdown in process as far as what should have happened but didn't happen.
Thank you.
Would you concede that?
I would, my comment on your question, Mr. Cooper, would be that there are many people in Canada who are on an ongoing basis being targeted by foreign interference. And it is not it was not my job to inform them. And there are processes and ways of doing so. And in this instance, I was not tracking what other people were doing.
Thank you. I would like you at a later time, and I'll provide you time if you would like it, to kind of reiterate the other point that you were trying to make, but you were not able to make. So if you just keep that written down somewhere, I think it is important for the work that we're doing. Mr. Gerritsen, 6 minutes to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Stewart, for being here. So I want to jump in a little bit to the exchange that you just had with Mr. Cooper. And you mentioned it a number of times. You said a river of intelligence. You talk about a lot of intelligence. I mean, I think the picture that's trying to be painted here by my colleagues on the other side of the table is that a memo shows up on your desk. It's unique. You don't often get memos. It's sitting there. You read it, and then you say, I don't need this, and throw it in the shredder. Can you tell us a little bit more about the river of information, about how the process works, about how much you're getting on a daily basis?
Sure. We collect two kinds of intelligence in Canada, or by Canadian agencies: human intelligence and signals intelligence, and that turns into both raw reports of the information that's obtained, and assessed intelligence, which are distilled into, analyzed for credibility and verifiability. There are also standalone pieces that are done by a couple of units in the government that generate, kind of views of the world with top secret and informed by intelligence, top secret information embedded in them. Then there are many things we obtain through the Five Eyes network, which are the product of various agencies in those countries. And those things are all tend to be bundled into a binder, maybe with some tabs. And then, every couple of days you get a binder. And you flip through the binder and you try to detect trends or issues of interest.
Yep.
And those tend to be, from a public safety point of view, the larger ones.
So every couple of days you get a binder. How thick is that binder? You're showing about 4 inches?
A couple of inches.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my next question then is, you said you get intelligence. Is intelligence evidence?
No.
Oh, explain the difference, please.
Well, I don't know quite what you mean by evidence. It's not.
Just because you get a piece of intelligence, does that mean that immediately becomes evidence to go out and arrest somebody? Or
No.
Can you explain the difference between the two?
Okay, so intelligence, particularly raw intelligence, can be anything in a range of things, from something that you have some certainty about, or something that sounds very speculative. So this is why we assess intelligence, is to make sure that there's credibility, and when we use language, it's typically used by the community as we assess this to be the case as opposed to we know it to be true.
And so you must put the various pieces of intelligence on a ranking system of some sort in terms of how credible it might be versus how non-credible, how it distributes amongst your trends that you were talking about. I won't ask you to get into where you ranked anything, but do you do some sort of process like that?
Again, for my part, in my role, I'm monitoring, it's the agencies, in particular CSIS and Communication Security Establishment, who report to different ministers, by the way, who are kind of the first order briefers of the ministers in where there are issues of importance, and I would not presume to take their place.
So how much time do I have, Madam Chair?
2 minutes, 49
okay.
seconds.
So I'm interested to know, you're part of the group that comes together during that caretaker mode during an election to monitor in real time and respond in real time. I think that a lot of people would like to portray this as five people, you being one of them, sit around a table and just look at Facebook all day long and Twitter and then make decisions. Oh, this looks like a threat. We should. Tell me about the resources that go into providing you with the intelligence that you have. I mean, are we talking about departments and networks? Like, what goes on in order to provide you guys, the five people sitting at that table, with intelligence? What's the apparatus like supporting that?
Well, the Site Task Force is composed of the Communication Security Establishment, CSIS, the RCMP, and Global Affairs, and each of those is an army of people. And a whole process of distilling information and bringing it into a report which is presented to the panel of five. It's what we call it, and so it's quite an exhaustive and large effort on an ongoing basis, from early and on an ongoing basis, frankly, but that heats up as you get into an election and then becomes active once the writ is dropped.
And would there ever be a time when you receive intelligence and then the five of you, based on the various different inputs that you get, have to make a determination as to the credibility of that and how to act on it? I mean, that's your primary job,
That
correct?
is the role of the panel.
And you are saying before the committee today that in 2019 and 2021 during the elections, yes, you received information, but there was nothing that signaled that it had any influence in the outcome of the election. I heard you say that earlier. I just want to give you an opportunity to repeat yourself. And to
part of the panel in 2019.
Okay.
But I can say as
They
part of the panel in
gave a report to that
2021,
effect,
yes,
right?
and this has been subsequently reported and assessed by people who look at the operation of the panel ex post, that the panel did not determine in either election that there was a threat to the integrity of the election.
The panel did not determine that there was a threat, so there was no threat. There was no. Rephrase that. There's too many negatives there for me.
There is an ongoing level of foreign interference. It's a very serious problem. Okay, there are clandestine and deceptive efforts to influence our democratic processes and society on an ongoing basis. We should take it very seriously. It was not judged by the panel that had an influence on the election.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madame Goudreau, 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to thank our witness, who I must say has been a former Deputy Minister of Public Safety, and now you are at international trade. That being said, you are in your position when China came up with all these strategies. I recognize your senior career as a senior official. I would like to demystify the situation and seek some understanding in light of the other witnesses that we've heard. Correct me if I'm wrong. Do I have the impression that the government system that was set up to deal or prevent foreign interference, is it effective? Russia interfered in 2017. Today, we have a lot more very subtle, targeted strategies. And I wonder, because people are watching us, are we equipped? Are our services ready to deal with all these methods? Absolutely, yes. I'm now in that position. You are saying yes, but you are shaking your head. No, I said yes. From what I've heard, we recently took measures to reinforce the signals intelligence system in a way that is more effective, including setting up a cabinet committee. Madam Chair, when you say something that is more effective or more conscious, what do you mean by that? I believe it's clear that we receive a lot of information every day. Everything should be put in perspective. As you asked, as we always asked, people say, so what? This is something that is difficult to do. It takes time. It's the key process in our system. Now we have a lot more processes that deal with this issue. To better understand, Madam Chair, so what? What I understand from that is we need to have a certain judgment or perception of what we are listening to, what we need to do. So it's not systematic where we have a red light that comes in and then we know we need to go investigate further. Okay. I still have some time, Madam Chair. You know that we received
A dit que le mécanisme
Tara Dennis, who came to talk about the rapid response mechanism from the G7 that talks about using only open
ne partage
data. Why is CISIS not sharing more information? Maybe as we speak, it's already in force, but I'm concerned. Have some mechanisms changed since to help better detect the situation? Because now it's all about what we see, what we hear, and then there's trolls, there are different means and sources that are not in the open source. There's a link between the activities of global affairs that uses this mechanism to process information from the open system and a link with activities from other security agencies, that is for sure. When we talk about social media, we are getting into a very opaque world where it's difficult to understand certain things. And we do not necessarily have the power to be sure how everything works and to know who does what. So we need time. When there's an issue, to carry out analysis, carry out more investigations using our tools. And from time to time, we are not sure. I think I have some time left. When we talk about being certain, are there any recommendations that could be made considering that the situation is getting worse? We could see things are moving fast. There's a lot happening. But with the tools we have, I'm not reassured. So how do you intend to resolve the situation? I believe that measures that were taken recently enhance the system, and it allows us to better know what to do. Madam Chair, I would like to thank our witness who spoke in French. That's appreciated, Mrs. Stewart. Thank you, Madam.
Appreciate that all members were able to provide us unanimous consent to work through bells. We could get through your 6-minute round, Mrs. Blaney, if you would like, or would you prefer to return after the vote?
Well, I don't know how long it is until
There's
the
10
bells.
minutes. Oh, is your screen not showing it?
It's not showing me. So.
Yes, there is about 9 minutes, 50 seconds.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. I think
Taking
we can
it?
get to the House pretty quickly. Yep.
Perfect. So 6 minutes to you through the chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Stewart, for being here. I really appreciate it. So I've listened very closely to your testimony today, and I heard very clearly that there is a huge amount of information that comes in on a regular basis, that you have an army with different categories of people that are working on that information, and we've heard this repeatedly, that one of the challenges, of course, is going through all of that information and finding out if there's actually a threat. And so there's a minimum threshold that it sounds like everybody is waiting till that threshold is hit before any sort of action is taken. I guess what I'm trying to understand, and I'm hopeful that you can help me with this, and I just want to recognize that this is a changing reality, and technology is changing so quickly that across the planet, I think everybody's trying to figure out how to catch up to this new reality. But what is the process specific for MPs? And why I ask that is we're really here on a question of privilege of a member of this place who did not get information that would have been helpful for him to have. And as we are in this reality that we're in, I think it's important that Canadians trust our institutions, trust the processes that are in place, and that people who put their name forward to sit in these seats have some assurance that as they're doing their work, there are processes that are really looking after what's happening in terms of foreign interference in the work that they do. So if you could help us in any way to help us understand what is the process. Is there a particular process for MPs? Because we are particular. I understand a lot of people are targeted, and so I would assume that different categories of people targeted would have streamlines of how that process unfolds, and I'm wondering if that's the case for elected officials.
I'll apologize in advance because this really is not an area in which I'm familiar in terms of the processes. I'll speak to the panel and the 21 judicial election. The panel's job is to determine whether there is a threat to the integrity of the election in broad terms. It was not interpreted to be our job to determine whether there's a threat to the election in a specific riding, although we were informed of questionable activity in various ridings. And the way the panel works is it's supposed to tell the Canadian public if there's a threat to the election, right? That's its primary job. There are meetings with the political parties by the site task force on an ongoing basis, and so, you know, there is an expectation that were there to be determined to be a material threat, that would work in that fashion. As it happens, we did not come to that determination. So we are, you know, I think it's an open question today, the one you're asking, for which an answer is merited.
So we know that a lot, and it seems to me, a lot of these concerns are coming through social media. And I know that that is a hard thing to quantify, and there's different methods for every different type of social media. And I also understand that social media themselves have regulations or rules that are internal to their organizations. So I guess my question is, when it comes to elections, how is that monitored? Like, if a social media site is not doing its work to monitor these issues that they have a commitment to doing, what is the recourse in Canada? Do you have any sense of that, or who would be the right person to talk to?
in the context of the 2021 general election, we had an open line of communication to the social media platforms through the Privy Council office. And there were conversations prior to and probably during the election about, the need to maintain, awareness and take action where abuse of their systems was detected. The RRM mechanism was our eyes and ears to look at social media and to see whether there are trends in social media that look like they are promoting myths or disinformation, and that would have been a kind of a tool to use were we to have come to that conclusion. And we did see some things, although we were not able to determine their source in terms of who was doing it.
Well, I think that's going to be the hardest part in the next few years, is figuring out how to source that information. So I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that RRM Canada works with academia and civil society to conduct research. And I'm just wondering if you could share any information about what those partnerships might look like and what the research is telling us.
Sorry, no.
You have nothing.
That would be a question for Ms. Denham.
Okay, fair enough. So my next question for you, I noticed in your testimony you talked about the fact that information is not emailed, that it's downloaded, I think you said, and printed out and then provided to the people who are supposed to have that. So can you talk about, first of all, why it's not emailed, and second of all, downloaded from where?
We, as all countries do, have systems which are secure, right? Which in which they are, the information travels over secured communications technology, and and the endpoints for those systems are themselves in secure spaces. And so when I hear the word email, I think of the conventional version of email, and there is mail on those systems, but the mail is contained within the system.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what we're going to ask of you, Deputy, is that we'd like to be able to vote and then return. The motion had asked for an hour of your time, so I would like to be able to complete 60 minutes with you. And so when we return from vote, once all members are in the room, so please try to come back as quickly as possible. We will then proceed with that second round, and then hopefully we can send you on your way. Is that okay? Thank you so much. Okay, have a good vote, everyone, and we'll see you back in this room. Meeting suspended. Thank you. And we will start with Monsieur Berthold pour 5 minutes, suivi par Monsieur Lauzon, et puis Madame Goudreau, et puis Madame Blaney. Monsieur Berthold, 5.
Mr. Berthold, 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for coming to answer our questions. I would like to clarify a number of things because I'm surprised somewhat from answers I've received from many officials since we've started this study on foreign interference. We know that Parliament is at the heart of our democracy, and during elections, elected officials rely entirely on state officials to ensure the integrity of elections, be the commissioners, directors, or various groups, because elected officials are occupied elsewhere. What surprised me is to hear this defense of a river of information circulating about foreign interference and other issues of national security to justify the fact that when elected officials were targeted specifically by a communist regime abroad, in the case of those elections, no one saw it, or no one wants to take the responsibility for failing in their duty. We have the director of CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, who stated regarding information that Michael Chung and 3 others, Michael Chung in a memo and 3 elected officials were targeted. Their families in China were targeted. The director of CSIS said, as I stated before, CSIS and I send information to public safety, and you were deputy minister at that time, giving specific directives for this information to be communicated to the minister. The comment was clear. The committee should understand that the information was sent and the information note was sent. On your part, you are saying that there's a river of information circulating and the memo was not sent to the minister. CSIS tells us that that's 0 or 3 such memos per week. So in this flow of information, CSIS have been able to identify 0 to 3 important documents that should be sent to the department. How come you did not see it and that you did not transmit it to the minister? First of all, Mr. Berthold, I will not like to be, as deputy minister, somebody who is perceived as not taking his responsibilities seriously and not doing his best every day. It's the system that we had at that time that worked in a way that put me aside from the minister's briefing. The minister's briefing was done by the director. And it's up to the minister to decide what are the topics and concerns at the time. I am there, but I am not responsible for that. And the first question that I answered had to do with the situation in the summer or spring of 2021. And I believe that we identified the problems in the communication systems between the agencies at that time, of course. So what I understand from what you're saying is that it's up to the minister to decide what briefings he should be receiving or not. Thank you. Madam Chair, I would like to table the following motion, that the committee resume the work on Mr. Cooper's motion, the motion that was suspended during our last meeting. Please.
Maintenant.
So just calling the question on whether we want to switch to the other motion or maintain. So the clerk will call the question. just call the question. If you want to do it, yes. If you don't want to do it, no.
Ms. Romanato.
I'm just confused. We have a witness here, but
Okay, I'm sorry.
just
I
as
was
mean at me
couldn't-
as you.
No.
Mrs. Sahota.
For respect for the witnesses, no.
Mr. Lauzon? No.
Même
Mr.
chose,
Duguid?
no.
Mr. Gerritsen? Mr. Cooper?
Support?
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Monsieur Berthold?
Oui. Yes.
Mr. Falk? Madame Gaudreau?
Non.
Ms. Blaney?
I want my last question, so no.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
Point of order. Point of order.
Mr. Cooper, point of order.
Yeah, on a point of order, Madam Chair, what we have is the cover-up coalition at work yet again, seeking to go
Point of order.
behind closed doors rather than to deal
Okay,
with this matter
okay,
openly and
okay.
transparently to
Can you
get
please
to the
off his
bottom
mic?
of one of the greatest international
Okay,
embarrassments
okay,
brought
okay,
upon by
okay.
this Prime Minister
Okay.
with an SS
Okay.
soldier addressing
Okay,
Parliament. And
I think you can
it's
hear
really
Mr. Cooper.
disgraceful.
You no longer have the floor when the chair starts to speak. You know standing orders very well. We know how committee functions. Mrs. Romanato, point of order.
My intervention was going to say to Mr. Cooper, state what standing order is being broken, but I understand that you've already intervened. Thank you.
So I am going to remind members that all of us came together to choose who our witness list was, to choose how we were going to proceed, and time was consumed, and we agreed upon the way to do that. Prior to leaving to the vote, I asked, do we want another round of questions? Or can the deputy minister go on his way? Because the motion had asked for 60 minutes. And I believe it was your motion, Mr. Cooper. So therefore, I confirmed that I will make sure members get their 60 minutes at minimum with this witness. And today I am seeing now, for the second time this week, that Conservatives believe they can ask their questions and no one else gets to. That's not how this committee works. And I do observe a lot of other committees. So as the chair of this committee, I'm reminding members that we have a question of privilege that was not referred to us by another committee. It was referred to us by the House of Commons, where we are elected to serve for the people of this country. A member of Parliament stood in that place and said they felt threatened and felt unsafe, that their parliamentary privilege was violated. Parliamentary privilege that the average Canadian will never experience, yet we serve in the House of Commons. We are to respond to that question of privilege. And I never want to have to give this spiel again. We have witnesses coming, and I want everyone to be honest about their attempt to it, or to be honest as to what they are suggesting. Mr. Cooper.
The only reason it's been necessary to bring this motion at this time or to resume debate is because of every effort made on the part of Liberals and New Democrats to have an in-camera meeting to deal with the issue of the former SS soldier that was introduced before the House of Commons in what is Justin Trudeau's biggest international
So it's
embarrassment.
debate. Okay,
We want
thank
transparency.
You. So as per
Point
the
of
vote,
order.
we are...
Point of order.
Mr.
Just-
Berthold, point of order, and
Oui,
Mr.
juste,
Gerritsen.
Madame la Présidente, avec tout le respect.
Madam Chair, with all due respect, you doubted the honesty of our interventions, and I think it was legitimate for Mr. Cooper to explain the reasons behind that, following what you said, accusing us for not being honest, I think that Mr. Cooper had the right to justify himself. That was a legitimate point of order. I will go to Mr. Garrettson, but I was talking about other members of parliament who want to ask questions, and they must also have the opportunity to ask their questions.
Just incredibly embarrassed on behalf of everybody when we do this stuff in front of a witness. Would it be possible to just either allow the witness to leave or finish the questions, and then we can get back to the petty stuff amongst us without having to subject the witness to this?
Thank you. Monsieur Lauzon, 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Stewart, for being here today. I believe you clearly stated how you received a river of information. I think many questions concerned that relevant information, but you did not talk a lot about how information is processed. You talked about your group of five senior officials, where you discuss information. You also talked about information that comes from everywhere, from different departments. You named them, and some of my colleagues in their questions talked about some sources. Now, when you receive that information, what's the process for processing this information? How do you analyze the information? How complex is it to analyze that information in your group of five? Could you answer that? Of course. Allow me to clarify something, because I talked about two things. At the beginning, I spoke in general terms, answering to Mr. Garrettson. I talked about the system in general and how it works, the entire intelligence system, the analysis system. In the case of the panel, the work we do during the read period, the system works differently. We have the site task force composed of various agencies, the RCMP included, and they intensely analyze intelligence when it comes to elections. There's a more targeted process that deals with specific issues to find out whether there's interference in the elections process. When you talk about the process, whether there's interference concerning elections or a member of parliament, when this group obtains information, could you tell us how you deal with the information? During the writ period, when the panel works, every week the panel meets to be briefed by the site task force. These are very detailed briefings with information coming from various sources that target the issue to find out if there's interference. After that, the panel discusses the information and the general situation. And we look at the threshold of interference, because interference continues during the elections process. In many ways, there are many methods used by the Chinese, for example, to interfere and to act against the interests of Canada. We discussed that with the various of the panel, and we try to find out if there is interference that gets to the threshold. Let me come back to the testimony we received last week from Ms. Tyra Dunham. She talked about, and I quote, she said, "They may have been false or misleading information. It's highly likely that there had been foreign interference." So when we use such terms, it's highly likely, and I'm quoting her, do you have a process that enables you to check that information and to find out whether it's highly likely or less likely? Because you say information comes from various sources. So when you receive that information, how can you tell us so we can better understand the complexity involved in cross-checking the information, including the deadlines or timelines?
C'est toujours
It's always difficult to verify the information exactly in a way as to obtain the truth. There's always a range. We use various means to analyze the information within the framework of the RRM that my colleague Taram talked about. The group does its best to understand who does what in social media. Those are activities that originate from the Chinese state, for example. Thank you. Madam Goudreau. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very sorry that you have had to be subjected to this experience. Two such interventions in one meeting. I don't wish a third for you. I'll be very constructive. I have one simple question. In the responses that I received talking about the recent changes made, I just want to know at what time were there changes? When you talk about recently, do you have a date, a month? That's all I need to know. Summer of this year, the Privy Council office set up a committee of senior officials to look into the so what issue when it comes to national security. And then the Prime Minister appointed a cabinet committee that is dealing with national security. And he is the chair of that committee. So that was after May of this summer. Perfect. Thank you. That's all for me, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you, too. Madam Blaney.
Thank you so much, Chair. And, you know, this is of particular importance to me as well because one of my members was also targeted. And I know that it is a growing concern. And I think that as we look at democracy, we have to do all that we can to protect it, and that means protecting the systems. So one of my questions for you is of course the focus right now is on the election period, which I understand and I think it's important. But we also know that there's activities happening in between elections, and even if it's targeting a particular member, it creates a trend that is concerning to me. And I know that RRM Canada leads the G7 RRM. So I'm just wondering how, if you could share with us, how are those folks coming together to talk about best practices with what's happening? And is there any discussion about having more work done in between elections to address some of these trends that we're seeing that are concerning and that sort of add up to a bigger impact during the election? What I'm worried about is if we simply are waiting to address this at election time without that sort of understanding that between election time is also very important for election time, that we're going to be missing important factors.
I can't answer the G7 part of that question because it's not in my role at the moment, but I can speak to the more general point of and start with the point that many reports have been written and notice given of the need to do more on a continuing basis to track foreign interference. And it isn't as if it's ignored in any way by the agencies that are responsible for national security, but to amplify the messages for people to understand better the threats, including parliamentarians. And those are in the reports that were written after the 2019 elections, as well as the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. The point here is that there is sort of layers to defend against foreign interference, which, as I have said before, goes on all the time. And one of those layers, if you'll permit me, Mr. Chair, is just people's understanding and ability to recognize when it's happening. And then there's the question of the diagnostic when it occurs and how we respond to it.
Thank you so much. With that, Mr. Stewart, we would like to thank you for your time and attention today. We appreciate, if anything comes to mind, let us know. We wish you the best and appreciate you making time. Meeting suspended. We will continue with committee business when we return from the suspension and it's been switched over. Thank you.